Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is No Country for Old Men. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of No Country for Old Men with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. No Country for Old Men is a 2005 novel by the American writer Cormac McCarthy, who just passed away recently. McCarthy was considered one of the best contemporary writers, and it is somewhat of a surprise he hasn't won a Nobel. But the Literary Commission has strange and secretive ways of selecting their candidates. McCarthy has been writing since his youth, but his success came late in life, after 50, which I think is true for most great writers, especially nowadays when people don't read much. Also, to write well, one needs to reflect on his life and experiences, and this takes a certain level of maturity. What is No Country for Old Men about? It is about cause and effect, some might call it fate. One decision starts a downward spiral, not only for the maker, but also the people around him. I had no say in the matter. Every moment in your life is a turning, and every one a choosing. Somewhere you made a choice. All follow to this. The accounting is scrupulous. The shape is drawn. No line can be erased. I had no belief in your ability to move a coin to your bidding. How could you? A person's path through the world seldom changes, and even more seldom will it change abruptly. And the shape of your path was visible from the beginning. It is also about greed, since the fatal decision is spurred by it, and all the subsequent violence is to recover the money taken. Greed seems to be the main theme, and it leads to the reflections on the changing America, its values and morality, which can only be seen by the people who have been living long enough to remember how it was before, the old men, which is kind of ironic since the change will have the least effect on them. A bit of the plot. The action takes place in the 1980 Texas along the Mexican border. Lowland Moss, while hunting, comes across a drug deal gone wrong and finds himself in the possession of a suitcase containing over $2 million. Unfortunately, he has been identified through the vehicle he drove, and various parties go on his trail, including the psychopath Anton Chigurh. The only ally Moss has is the local sheriff, Ed Tom Bell, who is somewhat of a narrator. The plot follows Moss through his violent encounters with Chigurh and other gang members, trying to keep himself alive while holding onto the money, and also, as an afterthought, protecting his teenage wife. And the sheriff, who is somewhat of an unintentional observer, watching helplessly the whole tragedy unroll. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about No Country for Old Men? Similar to most, maybe even all, McCarthy novels, it is violent physically and psychologically, with a kind of hopeless struggle against our destiny, which is death. The characters are deep but explored not through description, but through their actions and conversations. Except for the sheriff, who is somewhat of a narrator, so his inner reflections are vocal. He tries to make sense of the seemingly meaningless violence around him. He is older and compares how things have changed over time, also tries to rationalize why. The conclusion seems to be that the world has always been a violent place. The only thing that changes are reason and means, and the post-war peaceful period he lived through was more of an exception. The sheriff also embodies the title. He is the old man who doesn't fit in, and because of his age, he can see the changes. His thoughts are somewhat of a reflection on death, The world changes faster than we personally do, so we need to move on to make room for the next generations. It somewhat justifies that and even makes it into something not only necessary but also a thing that can be looked forward to. There is a dream Sheriff has about his father. It was cold and there was snow on the ground, and he rode past me and kept on going. Never said nothing, he just rode on past, and he had this blanket wrapped around him, and he had his head down, and when he rode past, I seen he was carry fire in a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream I knew that he was going on ahead and that he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all the dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there, and then I woke up. And this moving on relates to the title, No Country for Old Men, which is the first line in the poem Sailing to Byzantium by Yeats, where Yeats, an old man in his 60s, decides to leave the country of the young and sail to Byzantium, which is a metaphor for dying, since Byzantium, at one time center of European civilization, doesn't exist anymore. It has been conquered by the Turks some 500 years before and renamed Istanbul, so he is following the fate of Byzantium, traveling into oblivion. And to me, it links to the reflections on getting old and the need to die. And this makes Sheriff Bell one of the main characters of the book, together with Moss and Chigurh, even though he is not directly involved in the plot, but observing and making conclusions where we came from, where we are, and where we might be going. I think we are, all of us, ill-prepared for what is to come, and I don't care what shape it takes. And whatever comes, my guess is that it will have small power to sustain us. These old people I talk to, if you could have told them that there would be people on the streets of our Texas towns with green hair and bones in their noses, speaking a language they couldn't even understand, well, they just flat out wouldn't have believed you. But what if you told them it was their own grandchildren? Looking at life from a perspective of time, which can only be done by an older man, how it changed, and if the change was nothing more than superficial, keeping the human core unmoved. Lowland Moss is presented as the protagonist, but somewhat incidental, a hero or more of an anti-hero. He represents an average bloke caught by the violent circumstances. He brings the trouble upon himself by deciding to take the money he finds, but the blame can be placed on the society in general for encouraging greed, putting materialism over peace and safety. McCormac is showing the transformation of the American society, moral, and the new type of violence it created. On the other hand, Moss might also be seen as a spark of hope, a proof that not all is lost. He goes back to the crime scene the following night. The reason might have been to look for more money, but he also takes water to one of the dying drug dealers who asked him for it. It seems it was his consciousness that forced him to do it. He took the jar of water from the refrigerator and unscrewed the cap and stood there drinking in the light of the open refrigerator door. Then he just stood there holding the jar with the water beating cold on the glass, looking out the window and down the highway toward the lights. He stood there for a long time. It showed that deep inside, passing all the superficialities, we can still be moved by our humanity. It makes us feel guilty and acts against our selfish interests. Well, maybe not Chigurh. Unfortunately, this gesture of compassion was maybe not the reason, but it was partly responsible for Moss's future troubles. As the old saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished. So Moss is in the grasp of greed, but there are some traces of morality left. He seems to represent the country, America as a whole, the new generation. He is young and full of energy and desires abundant life. There is also the adventure that drives him. He is a hunter and is aware of the possible dangers his actions might create. If you knew there was somebody out here, afoot, that had $2 million of your money, at what point would you quit looking for him? But he is still willing to risk it all and goes for it, because he is an American, an optimist, and feels he can win. Most might be the symbol of the generational crossroads individuals are facing, something between the futuristic Anton Chigurh and the past represented by Sheriff Bell. Greed is shown to be present in all the society, but more evident in its younger members. Everything is being brought down to a price. The young man agreeing to give Bleeding Moss his jacket in exchange for $500, the Mexican cleaner, when asked by Wounded Moss to take him to the hospital, asks if he has money, and later two teenagers arguing how to split the money given to them by Chigurh. Also, there is presenting the evil as some type of absolute, not relative to the circumstances nor time. The paper said it was a crime of passion, and he told me there wasn't no passion to it. He'd been dating this girl, young as she was. He was 19, and he told me that he had been planning to kill somebody for about as long as he could remember. Said that if they turned him out, he'd do it again. Some people are just bad, and there is no redemption for them, and Anton Chigurh epitomizes it. He's totally disconnected from any morality of the present-day society, even morality in general. He seems an alien or somebody from the future, a Terminator-like creature, appearing to give us a glimpse into the future of humanity evolved from our current trajectory. He seems to kill for the sake of killing and doesn't look for nor considers other options. And you, what about your enemies? I have no enemies. I don't permit such a thing. He's highly professional, and it all seems a job for him. He tells the man, before shooting him, to step away from the window so the broken glass doesn't fall on the pedestrians below. On the other hand, Chigurh seems to enjoy the control and power he has over the lives of other people, and he might get the ultimate feeling of power from taking somebody's life, being able to decide if the other person lives or dies. But at the same time, he seems to allow for luck through coin toss, but it is only an illusion since he believes in some form of destiny and that outcome has already been decided. And probably because of it, he sees himself as a kind of angel of justice, punisher for our sins, uncontrolled greed. Anything can be an instrument, Chigurh said. Small things, things you wouldn't even notice. They pass from hand to hand, people don't pay attention, and then one day there is an accounting. And after that, nothing is the same. Well, you say, it's just a coin, for instance. Nothing special there. What could that be an instrument of? You see the problem, to separate the act from the thing, as if the parts of some moment in history might be interchangeable with the parts of some other moment. How could that be? Well, it's just a coin. Yes, that's true. Is it? Chigurh is deep and very serious, a philosopher of doom, and he is somewhat out of place. He has some solid principles, which he never compromises, and this makes him scary and memorable. Even his way of killing is very unusual. He uses a high-pressure air tank, and it seems an act of execution after being condemned to death by some kind of higher power. And the sin, besides greed, might have been the wasting of one's life, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The killings seem his calling, similar to a religious experience, and at the same time sadistic in the sense of giving him some sexual gratification. I think Chigur is somewhat paradoxical, even though he seems everything but, so he and his actions are pretty subjective. McCarthy uses the drug war, focusing on the areas along the Mexican border as the background for the plot, what the war has done to the society, the consequences for individuals. The characters have to face the brutal reality of the world they inhabit with the daily senseless violence and the suffering it brings. I think if you were Satan and you were sitting around trying to think up something that would just bring the human race to its knees, what you would probably come up with is narcotics. The drug war is presented as a kind of pinnacle of the perversion wars created in the society. There is reminiscing on the previous wars. The sheriff is a World War II veteran, and it made him into the man he is, just and concerned for the victims. Some of the other characters served in Vietnam, and it shows the impact it had on their characters. They are more prone to violence and willing to engage in illegal activities. And the war on drugs seems to have taken the participants even further into the senseless violence. To sum it up, No Country for Old Men is a great novel, full of action, physical violence, and at the same time it offers some deep reflections and message about existence in the contemporary America, where greed and desire for money takes precedence over morality and even life. The game of cat and mouse between Chigur and Moss is somewhat of a backstage for more profound existential dilemmas facing contemporary society, and it can be taken as a warning about the direction we are heading. No Country for Old Men is a kind of manly book emphasizing qualities that unfortunately are quickly disappearing. I found the writing a bit similar to Hemingway, beautiful but simple and direct. I find it chilling at how much more progress we have made in the wrong direction since the publishing of No Country for Old Men some 20 years ago. Greed has become our new god. We are willing to do anything to satisfy it. We are facing artificial intelligence, probably a consequence of greed and ambition, which in the long run might become our own Chigur. Sometimes I feel as Sheriff Bell that this is no country for me. The world has changed a lot since I was growing up, for the better or worse. It is kind of relative, but I think we lost a lot of our humanity. In the old days, even the violence and greed seemed more human. There is a pretty good 2007 adaptation of No Country for Old Men. It is one of the better book-to-screen projects I have seen. I heard that originally the book was written as a screenplay, so this might explain its somewhat smooth transition into the visual media. The acting by Tommy Lee Jones and Josh Brolin is wonderful, and Javier Bardem is superb as the psychopath Anton Chigurh. I think he can be compared to Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs. And for me, in general, as an actor, Bardem comes across as the Spanish version of Jack Nicholson. So the film is pretty good. But overall, I think the book was superior, and it makes the plot more profound. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a soft cover, which I transformed into hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A, naturally tan hide I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I design the cover, which what I did here. I used this painting of Western Texas, arid, bare, and desolate. There's the sheriff's hat and star seemingly left behind after the old man departed, and I think it nicely relates to the title. This is the bag with the blurb, and inside the front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100 but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you're cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read the book. Adios.